My fellow Toastmasters, thank you all for the opportunity to speak for you today. Our clubmate Ashley gave a wonderful speech this month about barriers to women in leadership roles in the workplace. And being the left-leaning woman that I am, this got me thinking about that subject in the context of a much broader issue. And that issue is implicit bias. We use this term to describe instances when we have attitudes towards people or associate stereotypes with them with or without our conscious knowledge. Not only do these biases affect women in the workplace, they impact just about every aspect of life for everyone. Today, I'd like to delve into how these biases work, explore how different layers of implicit bias can affect the way that we perceive people, and consider ways in which we can acknowledge and challenge those biases in our own lives. To start, people have biases towards other people that have to do with literally everything. Whether a person is tax compliant, whether a person uses or abuses alcohol, whether a person actively and consciously conserves water. And that's all in addition to social biases like race and gender. I read a really interesting article by Dr. Robert Cooter. He's over at UC Berkeley, and he wrote a paper with two professors over in Israel titled The Misperception of Norms, the Psychology of Bias and the Economics of Equilibrium. And what this essay does is it delves into the findings of a whole slew of empirical studies that show just how often people overestimate how much others violate social norms. It's a moral pessimism that we project on other people consciously or otherwise. And this bias actually increases the probability that the subjects of that bias will become what the bias asserts they are. Essentially, the concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy seems to align with the psychological research behind bias. If you tell someone that they are something often enough, they are more likely to become the thing that you tell them they are. And more often than not, when it comes to bias, this results in barriers to people, whether or not they've yet fulfilled their own prophecy. To really consider how this works, I'd like to repeat an exercise that I took part in with Bethany von Steinberg. She's a talent and professional consultant here in Rochester. If you haven't met her, you should. And what this exercise does is it helps people to examine personal biases without the judgment or the perception that you're in a group setting and that other people will have opinions or project biases onto you while you're examining your own bias. To do this and to make sure that no one feels guilty or targeted or that there's any kind of problematic inner feelings with this exercise, I would like everyone to start by closing their eyes. Picture in your mind's eye a woman. I'm not going to give you any other restrictions for what this woman looks like, but take a moment to consider the appearance of the woman you've created. Think about why you made her look the way that she did, and what are your impressions of her because of that appearance. Now, I want you to alter the picture in your mind's eye, and maybe for some of you, this picture won't be altered at all. Make this woman African American. Now remember, when I ask this next question, it's only to analyze your own internal impressions. Did the clothing this woman was wearing change with the color of her skin? And if so, why? Let's add another layer. Keep the color of this woman's skin the same, but I want you to add a headscarf. There are many religions and cultures in which women wear headscarves, but in this case, this woman is now wearing a headscarf because she is Muslim. Think to yourself, did the surroundings that I envisioned for this woman change because of the headscarf? Did I have any impressions about this woman's education? What about the way she came to this country? Or the status of her citizenship? Let's add one more layer. Now imagine that this woman of color, who is also Muslim, is pregnant and that she is holding the hand of a small child. What are your assumptions about her marital status or her personal life in general, including things like her wealth or her employment? Did you also apply those same assumptions to the child standing next to her? That is how implicit bias becomes a cycle that is able to haunt the next generation before they've even had the chance to make their stand. Everyone can open their eyes. Notice how we've covered race, gender, religion, and socioeconomic class, all in our assumptions about one person. It's extremely important to note that we rarely, if ever, apply one single layer of bias to our initial perceptions of other people. I'd like to go back to a comment that I made at the beginning of this speech. I told all of you that I lean politically to the left. Right then, I generated an implicit bias from all of you about what the content of this speech was going to be. Sometimes it might have been a positive response. Some of you might agree with me politically and so have been more apt to take what I have to say to heart. But some of you might disagree with me politically. And I'm wondering, would that initial perception of me as a speaker have altered the way that you've perceived the content of this speech? Think about that. Think about the way that your biases shape your impressions of people and therefore shape the content of what they present to you or what they have to say. And I really encourage all of you to think and really make an effort to acknowledge the biases that you have and that shape your opinions of the people in your lives. When you people watch, when you sit in a meeting, when you're out with your friends, think to yourself, what are the perceptions that I have of this person? And do these perceptions stem from my personal experiences with that individual? From there, it just becomes a healthy habit. And the result is that you will be less likely to project stereotypes with people before you've had the chance to really get to know that individual. I'll leave you with this parting statement. Every person deserves to feel safe. Every person deserves to feel respected. Every person deserves the opportunity to achieve their goals as a result of their own effort and ability. Implicit bias creates barriers to all three of these things. I didn't write this speech to make any kind of assumptions about what biases the people in this club do or do not have. Everyone has biases about other people, myself included. But our assumptions are something that we have the power to challenge. Every single person alive has the power over themselves, and our opinions and our choices that we make as a result of those are how we use our agency to open doors, to create opportunities, and to impact other people for the better. Thank you all very much for your time this morning. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.